You're listening to Podfabula Productions, a mashup of fiction, nonfiction, ideas, and commentary, created and narrated by your author-host, Victor Acquista. Today's episode, The Marunkoff Equation. Hey everyone, welcome to Season 2, and thanks for listening in. A reclusive physicist vanishes. A brilliant, unexplained flash of light. A mysterious spherical void. A blackboard equation filled with complex calculations, a portion inexplicably missing. A government cover-up. Where is Professor Marunkoff, and what is the government hiding? Germany, August 9th, 1958. The professor's vigorous and near soundless erasure preceded an even more vigorous explosion of chalked mathematical symbols. His thoughts erupted in a series of jots and patters of creative exposition on the blackboard. With a final flourish of chalk to slate, the equation stood solved with the zeta sum in the lower right-hand corner. He grunted in satisfaction, and placed the worn stub on the ledge below, where it nestled quietly amidst a residue of white dust. He felt hungry. This sort of deep thinking always provoked a fierce appetite, but at that moment anticipation trumped hunger. Stepping back to admire the final product, he absently wiped his hands on his trousers and exclaimed, "Of course, of course. It was staring at me all along. I just didn't see it." No one overheard him, as the professor lived a solitary existence in the countryside outside Leipzig. More so, he dwelt solo within the rarefied genius of complex physics, residing inside a brain occupied by a world of quantum abstraction. He adjusted his spectacles and scratched his salt-pepper-bearded chin. Now to test it. On a tabletop, littered with capacitors, transistors, vacuum tubes, and an oscilloscope, a glass dome covered a rectangular box somewhat larger than a bread box. Wired to this, a short distance away, a control panel with toggle switches and several dials stood illuminated by multiple red lights and numbers. In the windowless room, lighted by a few incandescent bulbs, Professor Marunkoff scribbled entries into his work journal, his writing muffled by the faint buzz of a voltage regulator, an incessant cadence from the ticking wall clock. Moving to his left, he toggled a few switches and watched as the display bulbs turned yellow, then adjusted some dials as one by one the lights flashed green. At last! At last! He paused a moment, crossed himself, and depressed a blue button on the control panel. A slight click, the needle on an ammeter gauge danced, the voltage regulator whined. The oscilloscope screen dimmed momentarily, and a bass, throbbing pulsation came to life as the professor waited in anticipation. A low-pitched thrum accelerated in frequency and culminated at its crescendo in a peculiar tinnitus sensation. He held his breath. Two young lovers, parked on a hillside, and admiring each other along with the night sky, were startled by the bright flash of light a couple of kilometers away. They drew close, thinking missiles, bombs, and another war had begun. The lack of air raid sirens, or any noise of explosion, puzzled them. Could this be a meteorite striking the earth? Expecting some sort of loud crash, they looked at one another in amazement and waited, but no sonic boom ensued. They shrugged their shoulders and agreed something would probably be written about the strange, soundless flash in tomorrow's newspaper. They returned to kissing and groping. Authorities investigating the mysterious flash of light on the outskirts of Leipzig eventually arrived at Professor Marunkoff's country estate. No one answered the door chime, but his house was not locked. Everything appeared normal within until they entered the back of the home. There, the mystery deepened. Local investigators were dismissed, sworn to secrecy, and replaced by German government scientists dispatched to account for the spherical anomaly of complete emptiness. The spherical void measured 3.76 meters in diameter, centered at 0.914 meters above the floor, or rather, what used to be the floor. A hole cut in a precise circle from the room's remaining floor lay beneath the measured center of the void. A much smaller circle of mysterious emptiness resembled a circular chandelier escutcheon, cut as a hole in the ceiling above. At the perimeter of this ball of nothingness stood a portion of a chalkboard, with the lower third inexplicably replaced by a crescent curved edge. The vacancy at the slate's abrupt end corresponded precisely to the curvature of the outer rim of a 3.76-meter sphere. Two table legs, attached to a similarly curved partial tabletop, were visible beneath the missing floor, apparently having tumbled to the cellar below. There was no debris, no evidence of an explosion, fire, or other apparent disaster. A wall clock over the door continued to tick, although the time recorded was off by 2 minutes. A partially fused and still flickering Tesla coil stood erect in the south corner, its shadow image inexplicably captured on the room's white wall surface behind it. A similar photo image of a bearded, bespectacled man in profile adorned the north wall. This image, presumably of Professor Marunkoff, was all that remained of the reclusive physicist. One of the investigators claimed the shadow figure looked surprised. The official news release in the Leipziger Volkszeitung and subsequently distributed via other press channels. August 10, 1958, an unfortunate explosion at the home of Professor Heinrich Marunkoff has apparently claimed his life. Several reports of an unusual flash of brilliant light in a sparsely populated area led investigators to the genius physicist's home. Unmistakable evidence of radioactivity suggests an experiment gone awry. Due to the extreme hazard, the area has been quarantined by government authorities. Later, scientists concluded that the images resulted from an extraordinarily bright flash of light, not unlike the shadow images captured in stone following the detonation in Hiroshima. However, no organic residue was associated with the image found at the professor's estate. Beyond the incomprehensible chalkboard equation, with much of it missing, there remained no laboratory notes or unusual equipment. Of course, the false claim of radioactivity resulted in sufficient fear that none of the locals attempted to investigate on their own. The story soon left public awareness, and the German Federation cordoned the area in perpetuity. It remained an unsolved mystery, defying all known or hypothesized explanation. I just narrated the opening scene from my classic sci-fi short story, The Marunkoff Equation. You can find the rest of the story and learn what happened to Herr Professor on Amazon, and have your very own copy for a pittance of only 99 cents. I'll post a purchase link in the show notes, along with a really cool 15-second YouTube video link for the story, with my favorite reviewer comment, quote, "This is sci-fi that uses science like poetry," close quote. I hope you enjoyed listening to today's podcast episode. Check out the show notes for information about Podfabler Productions' Facebook page, my author website, and the 8 streaming platforms that carry the show. Please subscribe, tell your friends, and keep an eye out for my upcoming suspense novel, Serpent Rising. Until next time,